Some cases are so strange that they defy explanation. They involve interactions with beings that are so bizarre and have bizarre interactions that it seems improbable that someone would hoax something so specific. Yet there's also the alternative where an abduction is so mundane in its description or so dialogue heavy that one wonders if this was a hoax, why wouldn't they have gone more extreme with their story? This is one such case. It is extremely obscure and chock full of wonderful entities. Yet about 80% of the encounter involves a man basically having an AMA or a good old Q&A with an extraterrestrial. That's basically it, aside from a quick tour of the craft. But the reason this case is so interesting is the zany and thought-provoking conversations that the witness and the being have seems to almost have a logical credibility for the most part. This case, honestly, is at times one of the most grounded abductions, but at the same time has moments that go completely into the insanity valley. And it's because of this that it's one of my personal favorite cases and an undiscovered gem. In April 1975, John Womack was driving on a country road at the foot of Ryan Mountain in the Tennessee Valley in North Alabama. He was driving slow when he saw a ball of fire about 3 feet in diameter, which dropped from the sky and through the branches of some trees and into the road several feet in front of John Womack's car. This object rolled on the gravel road, and John would follow the object some 25 feet behind. The object remained in the center of the road and followed the road without ever stopping or running off the path, as though it had an intelligence all its own. John watched as the object went down a hill and turned a sharp right and even crossed a narrow bridge. John continued to watch as the object suddenly stopped 100 feet from the bridge and then proceed to make a 90-degree turn to the left and then move again, this time down into an open meadow which ran along a nearby creek, which the bridge traversed. When he stopped his car and got out and wandered over to the side of the meadow, the object suddenly began to make a noise like a blowtorch and then proceeded to shoot straight up, arch, over the surrounding woodlands to his left and disappear. John stared into the sky in absolute astonishment when he suddenly heard a low humming sound coming from the direction in which the object disappeared, and suddenly a huge silvery disc-like craft with shallow upper and lower domes appeared. The object was about 150 feet in diameter and 50 feet high or thick. It was surrounded by a yellowish-blue glow that extended several feet away from the craft and flew at an altitude of about 300 to 400 feet. This strange craft stopped about 100 feet from John and gave off a sound similar to a low humming that could be compared to a turbine or S-blower turning on at a high R. The object was able, however, to be incredibly quiet at first, as it got incredibly close to John before he had noticed that it arrived in the area. The craft hung in the air for what John felt was about 2 minutes, when suddenly the craft began to release a bright column of light that was several feet thick. John, upon seeing this luminous projection, began to get cold chills that ran up and down his spine and proceeded to walk slowly backwards towards the driver's side of his car. He did not get very far, however, as he watched the beam of light slowly reach towards the ground and spread out like fog or liquid on the ground. The UFO, as the object did this, unleashed a high-pitched whistling noise, and John watched as the light stretched out so far that it almost touched the road. The object soon went quiet, except for the continuous humming, and this liquid light also stopped in its tracks. John felt that this light might not have been light as we know it, or that what he might have been seeing was not even light at all, as this luminous matter seemed to have been denser yet mistier than light. It was at that point that the UFO started to descend as if it was riding down the column of light. Womack began to flee from the descending object and was moving much faster than his previous attempt of getting away. Yet upon almost reaching his vehicle, he turned and was suddenly hit in the face by a beam of bright red light. This light seemed to have knocked John unconscious, for the next thing he knew, he found himself aboard a craft, specifically in a large room about 50 feet by 50 feet and some 12 feet tall, and seated in a padded chair with a metal helmet seemingly made of gold on his head. The helmet on his head was connected to a cord which was plugged into a strange machine, which purpose John would soon discover. In this room, there were several other intricate looking devices and seemed to be brightly lit, yet without any discernible bulbs or other light source, as though the walls themselves gave off light. As he continued to look around, he also noticed that he was not alone, as there were three different kinds of entities surrounding him. Yet John was surprisingly calm and had initially thought that all this was a dream, but he soon learned that this was not the case. The first kind of entities he saw, which he dubbed the leaders, were similar to humans in most of their anatomy, except for their heads and facial features. These entities had egg-shaped heads with noseless faces and mouths like a porpoise's. These beings also had a wiry and kinky kind of short hair, which grew both on their upper lips and on the top of their heads, and they also wore slim, green, tight-fitting suits. They communicated in a language which John compared to sounding not unlike the croaking of a tree frog. Next, there were three colossal beings, which John called giants. There were two of these colossal creatures standing next to him, one on each side, and one which stood in another section of the room. These colossal creatures were at least 8 feet tall, with hairy chests, backs, and arms, and had brutal-looking faces, which would remind John of prehistoric men. These creatures wore no clothing except for pants. John knew, seeing these creatures, that any sort of confrontation on his part would be fruitless, and simply continued to examine the room. One of the most peculiar things about his situation was that there were some 6 to 8 5 feet tall creatures scattered about the room. These creatures were extremely bizarre, as they had seal or sea lion like flippered feet, 6 skinny arms, crab like claws, 2 antennae, and they also had beards. These creatures' bodies were covered with greenish, warty lumps, except for their heads, which were large and bore large grins. Yet John felt that this smiling expression made them appear comical and harmless. When these creatures would move, John would comment that their motions seemed awkward and difficult. As he peered around at this bizarre scene, he noted that while the room was covered in bizarre equipment and machinery, there was no door or windows, but a large TV-type screen that covered the wall to John's right. This screen showed a continuous stream of pictures of the area where the ship was landed. Every time the screen got to a photo of John's car, however, a buzzer would start ringing and the picture would stop. John would note that the screen was incredibly powerful at capturing images, as the pictures of his car would be incredibly bright and clear as daylight, even though this photo was taken at night. John thought, as he watched this screen, that he would never return home. It was then that one of the leader-type entities approached John and began to speak into a small square box-like device that was also connected into the computer-like machine that his helmet was plugged into. The being held this box in his hand, and upon finishing talking, the computer-like machine began to speak to John. The machine said in a mechanical artificial voice, "We are peaceful. We will not harm you. We are beings with feelings just like you. You are not a prisoner. You are a guest." The being then reached out and offered it to be shook by John. John, believing that he would not be harmed, then shook the entity's hand. Upon doing so, the other leader-type entity came forward with 2 white small pills and proceeded to place one in John's hand, and the entity motioned to John to swallow it, as the entity proceeded to swallow his own pill. John obeyed, and upon placing the pill into his mouth, it dissolved instantly, and he then swallowed the remainder. Upon doing this, John felt completely happy and at ease, and had a sudden desire to know more about these entities. John suddenly had the overwhelming sensation that everything felt good, including the helmet that adorned his head. John's brain was filled with joyful thoughts, and he realized he had never been this happy before in his entire life. The leader then proceeded to talk once more into the box, which would serve as the means to communicate between the two. The being explained, "This is a machine built by one of the most advanced races of people in this galaxy. It is capable of translating my language into your language. Also, it is able to reproduce your thought waves and language into my language. This machine is 10,000 years ahead of your knowledge. Attempting to understand how it works is a waste of time. We welcome you aboard our spaceship. You are free to leave anytime you wish." Do you wish to know more about us? Do you have any questions to ask? The leader then brought the box close to John's face. John was able to get a good look at the box when he did this and said it was similar in appearance to a small transistor radio and also about the same size of one. John would state that the machine would work thusly. He or the leader would speak into the little box, and once done talking, the leader would flip a switch and turn a dial on the box. Afterwards, the computer would repeat in the language of the listener what the speaker had said. The leader simply had to use the black box, yet for John, the headset was required for their communication, as it also registered his thought waves and voice. John spoke, "Yes, I welcome the opportunity to learn about your people." John, during this moment, still focused on why he was so full of joy and happiness, but was soon distracted by a strange sight at the opposite side of the room. There, John saw a strange object, which he soon realized was a kind of plant. It was kept in a kind of pot and reached almost to the ceiling and appeared to be half animal. The plant bore 8 feet long, black spotted octopus like arms that were devoid of suckers. The plant's trunk was about 3 feet thick, and it had hanging yellow balls of flowers and an orange crown on the top, similar to a giant honeycomb. The plant's arms would stretch out and would seem to go after the bearded crabmen when they would wander too close to the plant. One of these beings seemed to be playing some sort of game with the plant as he would approach very close only to retreat before the plant could grab hold. John, upon seeing the spectacle, thought, "My God, if only I had a movie camera." John's mind wandered back to his peacefulness and happiness and proceeded to ask the leader why he had felt this way, as well as just how he got aboard the ship. The entity reached over and flipped a switch on a panel and replied, "Take a look at the screen on the machine and you will see how you got aboard. We let down a ramp and you walked aboard the ship." The screen then showed an image of him walking up the ramp and him walking into the ship. Your brain was temporarily inactive by the red beam of light you saw. A signal in the beam caused you to follow it inside the ship. We gave you an injection which prevented you from becoming fearful and overly excited. An Earth being with a bad heart could die from the shock of your present experience without the injection. We certainly don't want to hurt anyone. It was then that the leader began to speak about his sudden joy and explained that it was the result of a scientific exorcism. The joy and inner peace you feel now is life in its purest, most perfect state. You are experiencing life completely free of demons for the first time. Demons exist throughout the universe. We do not fully understand these demons, which invade our minds and cause us to be evil, greedy, selfish, and unhappy. The pill I gave you is the anti-demon pill, and it has driven all demons and their influences from your mind, leaving you with nothing but pure joy in your soul. The anti-demon pill is our greatest discovery. The anti-demon pill eliminates all forms of hate, jealousy, greed, misery, and wars. It causes a person to be completely happy with just being alive. A person who is demon-free has no need for material possessions to give him a false feeling of security. When the mind is free of demons, only love and joy is left inside. These demons cause all wars. They cause us to have strong desires to seize the property of others. They cause us to murder, maim, rob, and enslave our brothers. Demons have destroyed the happiness of countless billions of souls. Much research is being done in our galaxy, perhaps the whole universe, on ways to destroy our greatest enemy, the demons. Our greatest problem has always been demons. Demons are real, not just states of the mind as most people think. They are not visible to the eye, but they do exist on a higher plane of living. Demons are able to enter and leave the mind at will. We have photographed them with special cameras and studied their habit, and we were able to develop a chemical which demons cannot tolerate. The pill is not a mind-altering drug. It is not that simple, and it does not work that way. Please accept my apology for the trickery we used to get you aboard our ship. John, seemingly still taking in everything, asked, "That's okay. I'm glad you did so the ball of fire was a trick." The entity then replied, "Yes," and John said, "How'd you do it?" The entity only shook its head, and John then followed up with, "That was a fascinating story about the demons, and I certainly feel demon-free at this time. Can you tell me more about your world?" The leader responded to his inquiry, "I would be delighted to." Watch the screen again, and I will also show you scenes of my world. Our planet is 40 light years away from your Earth. It is similar to your planet, but larger. Plant life is different, and as you can see, we are different from you in many ways, and we are much different from you in many ways which you cannot see. Everyone takes the anti-demon pill, and we live in a constant state of joy. Your people are faced with countless problems and live a short life. We have none of your common problems. Our people live for hundreds of years. We aboard this ship have not been home for 50 years, and if we started now, it would take 40 more years to reach our world. So you can see our journey is more than a lifetime on Earth. A chemical mixed without food keeps our body cells from aging. There is no disease on our planet. John then asked the being, "What do you eat, and how are you able to store enough food for such long space trips?" The being replied, "Our main food source consists of 8 different kinds of plants, which are then mixed with other chemicals and nutrients. This mixture is processed into small pellets. 6 pellets daily is a normal diet. We have no need for fine foods and fancy dishes. These things are frivolous to us. Of course, there is an endless selection of food sources on our planet and other planet for those who want a variety, but ordinarily we stay with our basic diet. We do not eat meat of any kind. The pellets of food, which is our basic diet, can be stored indefinitely." Um, John then asked, "I am curious to know how many planets out there in space are inhabitable. Do you know?" The being replied, "We know of hundreds of planets in our galaxy which are inhabited by intelligent beings. Because of the great size of our galaxy known to you as the Milky Way, we have explored only a small part of it. And certainly we are not able to visit other galaxies outside our own Milky Way. But we believe that at least thousands of planets are inhabited throughout the universe. There are many different varieties of intelligent creatures in our galaxy. On our present journey through space, we rescued the 3 giants and smaller creatures aboard our ship from certain extinction. Look at the screen again, and you will see what happened." The screen then lit up and began to show what the leader described. The small planet of the little people was devastated by storms and floods when a huge comet passed close to it. Those aboard the ship are the only survivors. The screen showed that these lucky survivors had holed up in an observation station at the highest peak of the planet. The being then continued, "The giants are what are left of a dying race. These people are the strongest, hardiest beings we know about. They can lift 3,000 pounds. Yet conditions became so harsh on their planet they could not survive. Notice on the screen the size of their sun. Their sun enlarged and the heat became unbearable. Most all the vegetation burned up. Their sun was dying. That is one of the hard realities of the universe. Planets are dying somewhere continuously." John, hearing this impending universal doom, then spoke up and asked, "Tell me, do you see much of a future for the people on Earth?" The being then said, "People on Earth are very unique in their ways. Your people are complicated but interesting to study. But unfortunately, you are the most belligerent and selfish people of all. Some of you are dangerous and treacherous. People on other planets who have mastered space travel are watching you and deeply concerned about your ill nature. Some of the top leaders in your world respect nothing but power and might. They are miserable souls who cannot rest unless they are reaching out and grabbing more power. They will stop at nothing in their insane endeavors to enforce their evil ways on others. Your country is the last hope for freedom on Earth. But for many years, your leaders have sold you out to the devil, those who are striving to enslave you. If you continue to allow your own weak leaders to sell you out, then freedom will not survive on Earth. Also, your people are becoming too selfish and irresponsible for effective self-government. This attitude must change, or you will lose the freedom you now enjoy. But it is really not the people who are evil, but the demons inside you. Your only hope for real peace and joy is to discover your own anti-demon drug. Only then will people on Earth respect each other and lay down their destructive weapons. And only then will people in your world get in the state of mind to trust and care for each other." John then began to ask, "How do you know so much about what is happening on Earth?" The entity then answered, "My people have studied your Earth for several thousands of years. We have watched your progress since far before the time of Moses. Our methods of monitoring and observation are far advanced. John, then realizing just how infinite the wisdom of these beings was, decided to put forth a question regarding one of the most enduring mysteries. Do you know the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle? The entity then replied, the mystery is, and then suddenly stopped and said, excuse me, we are not allowed to reveal any direct scientific information. Every world must progress and grow in knowledge in its own natural way. This is universal law. We know the answers to your problems on Earth, but we cannot help you directly, because the only way we could convince you to follow our advice is to use force. We have learned this from past experiences, so our policy is to let things be. Too much knowledge too soon will destroy you. Even now, your scientists have learned to use nuclear energy, yet the people of your world have not learned to live in peace. This knowledge is extremely dangerous, and it is a good example of too much knowledge too soon, and you have no clean, safe way to run your machines and gadgets. Your sun is the answer to your energy problems. It is the only final answer. Our sun supplies all of our energy needs. Even this spaceship, which travels among the stars, is powered by solar energy. John then proceeded, upon hearing the being describe his fuel requirements, inquire, is your time here limited? I mean, do you have time for more questions? The entity replied rather enigmatically, you will know when it is time for us to leave. Ask me anything you would like to know. If I can answer your questions, I will do so. John, having glimpsed a possible answer to a mystery, decided to ask about another and asked the being what it thought of psychics. The entity then replied, many of our people are psychic. Some are far advanced in the use of mental energy. Many are extremely accurate in their predictions and can move hundreds of pounds with mind power alone. Some of our people have the ability to predict dangers years in advance. They are very valuable to us, but we are far from knowing all the answers compared to what is unknown. We are still only infants in knowledge. There are enough mysteries in the universe to last for eternity. We have no idea how the universe came into being or what it is made of. This, the greatest question of all. That basic material which is the foundation of the universe seems to be beyond the knowledge of physical beings like you and me. John wanted to discuss psychics further and said, you mentioned that psychics are valuable to your world. Can you give me an example of why? The being replied, the most dramatic event happened about the same time in history that Columbus discovered this part of your world. One of our psychics predicted that our planet in 40 years would be hit and thrown out of orbit by a small planet the size of your moon. We located the wandering little world which was traveling through space out of control. Computers verified that indeed a collision was inevitable. We landed on the planet, which was solid rock, and seeded it with explosives like your world has never seen. The explosives completely disintegrated the wild little world, changing it into vapor. Giant. He showed John scenes of these events as he described them, and then told him that he knew of many catastrophes which were caused by two celestial bodies colliding into each other. The leader then told him that a race was eliminated by a wandering cloud of poisonous gases, yet another planet was frozen solid. The entity told him that planets were dying throughout the universe. The entity would describe how the universe naturally had stars that would burn out and explode, and specifically, no race is in control of its own destiny. John knew that his time conversing with these beings was coming to a close, yet surprising never asked any of the entities' names, especially the leader with whom he chatted the entire time. It was due to this closing time span that John began to ask more direct and specific questions. How can you be certain that other distant galaxies have not solved the mysteries of the universe? The entity answered and said, the best answer to that question is obvious to us. If others were that advanced, they surely would have communicated with us in some way by now. This has not happened. All space travel in our galaxy is done by inhabitants of this galaxy. We know this is true. We have not picked up even a faint signal from another galaxy. Of course, you realize the tremendous size of the universe. A trip to the nearest galaxy outside our own would take 1,000,000 years, traveling at the speed of light. It is almost unthinkable. Our spaceship will reach a speed of 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light. But even at that great speed, it is still too slow for practical space travel between the galaxies. Our own galaxy contains over 100 billion stars. Traveling at the speed of light, it would take 100,000 years to pass from one side of our Milky Way to the other. There are perhaps billions of galaxies in the universe. Some are no doubt billions of light years away. So you can see the complications and slow pace of space travel. The being once more pointed towards the screen and showed John the vastness and emptiness of space. John decided to get religious and proceeded to ask if the entity believed in God or some other supreme being. The entity surprisingly said, "Yes, and we believe those who are psychics are in a direct touch with the Creator in a small way. We believe a superior spirit or a superior intelligence must have created the universe and established the laws of nature. In our opinion, creation cannot be intelligently explained in any other way. But as I have already said, we have no idea how the universe was created or why. Exploring and studying the universe is our whole life, and we never tire of it. We have thousands of spaceships exploring our galaxy. We have many different types of spaceships." The being, seemingly tired of the matter of fact questioning, grabbed John then by the arm and said, "Come, let me show you around. We have many things aboard which you might be interested in." John, looking across the room, relooked in awe at the strange plant and said to the being, "I would like to take a closer look at the plant there." The two leader type beings began to talk amongst themselves in their tree frog style language. The other leader type being, who was in the room but did not conversate with John, began to bring forward a device about the size of a large TV set and proceeded to plug John's gold helmet into the device. And as John and the being moved to the opposite side of the room, the being pushed the device behind them. Upon reaching the plant, the being began to plug this machine into the panel that was a few feet from the extraterrestrial botanical specimen. Upon doing so, the being who had been talking the entire time began speaking again, saying, "We have two of these plants aboard. They supply us with all the oxygen we need, but we do have emergency supplies of oxygen aboard. The plants thrive on solar energy piped to them from our power plant and chemicals in the container it is in. Our bodies need very little oxygen and moisture. Fortunately, there is an abundant supply of moisture throughout the galaxy. Moisture in the form of ice, snow, water, and gases is plentiful on most of all planets. Since we can survive on so little, we can store enough moisture on board to last us for several years if necessary." John told the beings after this that the plant was beautiful yet looked dangerous. To this the being then said, "The plant is playful, and it enjoys our company. It is not dangerous. It is strong enough to hold on to one of the little bearded people, but it has never injured one of them." John was then given a tour of the ship, and John discovered that the craft had 4 floors with an elevator connecting the floors. The craft had 2 main floors with one large compartment on each of the 2 floors, as well as several smaller compartments. There were 2 auxiliary floors, one which was the engine room, and the other as a storage room. The engine room was located on the top floor, and John assumed the bottom floor must have been on the bottom floor, yet the entity did not confirm that this was indeed the case. The entity explained to John that the engine room, which was also referred to as a power plant, collected energy from the stars and changed it into a form of energy that could be used to run their ships. The being also added that solar energy could be stored for a long period of time. It was during this tour that John noticed that the ship had other beings aboard that resembled the leader. During his tour, he noted that there were approximately 25 of them, yet none seemed to take notice or interact with him, as though John was just another in a long line of species that had boarded the ship. John noticed that during his tour of the craft, that the object's humming sound that originated from the engine was practically inaudible inside the ship. The leader then proceeded to show John several machines, 2 of which John found particularly fascinating. The others were so scientific in their function that he had no idea what the leader was talking about when he discussed the object or just what he was trying to prove by explaining it. One particular machine the leader demonstrated was a device that was so powerful it was able to penetrate an object to its atoms. The result of this device could be seen on a screen, and upon looking, John could see all the atoms of the example object moving. In one of the smaller compartments on the ship, the entity asked John if he would stand behind a machine that was connected to a screen on the wall, which upon doing so, John was able to see live pictures of every organ, bone, artery, and muscle in his body. The leader explained that this device could be used to diagnose cancer and heart and artery diseases. They soon returned to the first floor, where John was escorted into an extremely advanced and technical compartment. It was then at that moment that the entity asked John, "How would you like to take a journey to the stars?" John had faith in the entity after hearing this ambiguous statement and replied that he was ready to go, even though he had no idea what the entity meant and, frankly, did not care. The entity then said, "I believe you are a good Earth person and one who wishes no harm or evil to others. We live in worlds billions of miles apart, but for a few short moments in time, Providence has brought us together. Our brief association will live on in my memory forever." John did not remember what he had said in response to the entity's statement, or if he had said anything at all to the being, as he was confused by this statement. The entity then pointed to the odd-shaped chair and motioned for John to sit down. As soon as John did so, a conical-shaped object began to drop down from the ceiling over John and the chair. Just before the object touched the floor, John heard the entity say, "Farewell, my friend, forever." Then the object touched the floor and lightning began to flash around him, and he heard the roar of a dozen tornadoes fill the cone. A greenish glow began to spin around him faster and faster. Then he realized he was suddenly drifting through a dark tunnel. He, however, could see light at the end of this tunnel, and John began to think, "My God, where am I at?" Upon passing through this dark hole, he entered a place of pure beauty. This place was indescribable in how spectacular it was, seemingly a view of the portion of the universe where the beings were from, and it was glorious. He saw worlds that were multicolored, revolving around a colossal sun. The outer worlds of this system were covered in snow and ice and sparkled like diamonds. Some of the planets closer inwards were covered with sky blue waters and pink sand and filled with red, yellow, and green varieties of plants. During this traverse through the solar system, he saw worlds with green valleys, winding rivers, snow-capped peaks, and exotic forests. He got close to the sun and saw white flames leap thousands of miles out into space. These flickers of heat changed in color to every color of the rainbow, and saw nuclear explosions and bursting giant bubbles of gas and fire. Suddenly, the light of the sun began to get smaller and smaller, and John soon realized that he was drifting back to the tunnel from which he was spewed. This continued until all went black, and the next thing he knew, he was sitting under a tree near the creek bank with no idea how he got there. He had thought he might have been dreaming, yet upon getting up, he saw that the UFO was still humming in the air and saw 3 red beams of light hit the ground where the craft had previously landed. The object then shot out of sight at ludicrous speed. John was confused by what just happened, but later felt that his trip through space was nothing but a dream or image concocted via the machine he had gone through, and during that time, the beings placed him near to where they picked him up. Yet John posed one last question during this encounter: how can we be certain that life itself is not just one big dream? John would later chronicle his abduction after telling about his encounter to Hugh Helms during the same month in his 18-page book, I Was Picked Up by a UFO.